if I remember
Okay,
correctly.
so you know what? It might be that because of the fact that I don't come from an extremely religious family, this could be a thing maybe in the broader community that I wasn't aware of. And think about it, like being brought up like in a Jewish community in Iran, like you're not always aware of.
Well, there are a lot of misconceptions that are brought down regarding the 3 weeks, which is why, I wouldn't deny if it goes as far as to say that maybe on Tisha B'Av you don't have to fast. But like Yochanan and I were talking about this, how there's communities, how there's a rabbi online, his name is Rabbi David Brachaim, that talks about that there's an opinion not to fast from a halachic level nowadays. And in Kfar Chabad, there's some people who believe that the Rebbe is the Messiah, and instead of fasting, they do what Zachariah says, they have a feast day, because the understanding is that all these fast days are going to be turned from days of mourning to days of feasting. For example, there's the practice nowadays is to mourn for the whole 3 weeks. So they don't take haircuts, they don't listen to music, but they do everything that an Elvel does. However, that appears nowhere in the Talmud. In the Halacha, in the Mishnah, it doesn't say that you mourn the 3 weeks. It says you only mourn the week of the 9 days, which is not really the 9 days, it's the week of the 9 days. Nowadays, they start mourning the 9 days, and of course they skip on Shabbos, but they start mourning from the 3 weeks. So from 3 weeks, they don't listen to music and they don't take haircuts, when there's no source for that. There's also no source for mourning during the Sphira. During the counting of the Omer, there's no source for that in the Talmud. Right? It talks about Rabbi Kiva students signing this now, but it doesn't say that the Jewish people took it upon themselves to mourn and not take haircuts. And heck, a lot of people don't even get married. So you're putting aside a Torah commandment to possibly even procreate on a custom that doesn't even appear in the Talmud. So this is why I wouldn't be surprised if what your community was doing was correct. I just have to double check it, because sometimes that's how we know what's more authentic with what other communities do, and that forces us to kind of go into the text and see, wait, is it even there, or we've just been doing it for so long that we think this is what Judaism teaches, and it's not the case.
So I'd say don't take my word for it. But at the same time, if that was the case, if what I'm saying is the case, so that they don't have a Tanit on Tisha B'Av in general, I would assume, and just kind of theorizing, that this could be due to the fact that the foundation of the Jewish community of Persia was not there in the land to see the destruction of the temple. So it could have even, they could have, they didn't keep updated with that for a while, I'm assuming, till they, do you see what I'm trying to say? I think for Ashkenazim, like their ancestors, this is the beginning of a huge catastrophe. It's their expulsion and so on, which is not the case for the Jews of Persia, Babylon. But Talmud was written in Babylon. At the same time, that's why I'm saying maybe.
So Tisha B'Av includes the mourning for the first temple as well. It's not just for the second temple.
But wait, so it happens to be that historically speaking, those two events happen on the same day, or we just associate?
Well, that's what they say. I don't take a lot of that stuff seriously. I remember during when Saddam Hussein was killed, they were saying, look, he got killed on Purim, but they said this a few years after, and I'm pretty sure things don't align like that. But the understanding is that, yes, they supposedly happen on the same day. And I think that's a distinction, that Tanakh says that it was in the 10th when it was actually destroyed, the first temple, right? Because, Tanakh's not going to comment on the second temple because there was no more Tanakh or whatever. It was closed by that time. But yeah, supposedly it occurred the same day.
I've heard from someone associating the Spanish Inquisition with Tisha B'Av.
Oh, there's a lot of things, but I don't know if these things are verifiable. People say it because it sounds like, I don't know, it's what you want your grandson to hear if you want him to become religious is like, you see, like if you don't get your act together, this is what's going to happen. I don't know if that's verifiable, and I think that attitude actually hurts people in the long run once they realize, well, you lied about this, what else did you lie about? But yeah, they do that a lot. I don't think most people take the time to actually check to see if this person died on Purim or this event happened on the 9th of Av. Yeah.
Also, people were probably like, if you want to mourn, let's assume, let's just mourn for everything on one day of the year. Like, this is not Shia, is not.
Right, absolutely. And we're talking about Ashkenazim before. So, I mean, I think Pesach is like a Yom Kippur for Ashkenazim, just because they can't eat, rice, they can't eat beans, they can't eat, and if you're Lubavitch, you don't eat gebrux. It's quite horrible, right? I mean, bamba. In Israel, everyone loves bamba, right? Only the Sephardim could eat it because it's got kitniot in it. So it's true. The understanding is that virtually all the fast days that are minor fasts are not obligatory nowadays. Now, people still keep it, and of course in yeshiva, they're not going to make a distinction, right? I mean, good luck trying to find, something in the mess hall to eat on those days, but they're optional. They're fully, from the fast of Esther, like these are all optional fasts. And to
not
the point,
Kippur though, right?
No, right, but that's not a minor fast. Like the fast of Gedalia, like all these little fasts that people fast half the day. The reason they fast half the day, because the Talmud doesn't make a distinction between fasts that are half the day and the full day, is because they understand that it's an optional fast, so they instituted it on the Haredi level for half the day. But there's no such thing as a half the day fast. All fasts are kept the same way from a Mishnah perspective. So there's a lot of people playing around with our religion and saying things are obligatory when they're not obligatory. And when you start looking into it for yourself and you start speaking out, that's when you can't find a shidduch and they kick you out of clubhouse and they call you a fake rabbi. So, just because you try to explore.
If I wanted to elaborate on my piece on the fact that we follow Pharisee Judaism, which is nothing wrong with it, absolutely nothing. But the truth of the matter is it's not. I think everybody's at this point, like we still talk about it, and that's the fact that the Judaism that we have, at least practically, ritualistically at least, okay, not philosophically, ritualistically, it's not the same thing as it was practiced in the land, and it makes sense. It makes perfect sense why it's not the same thing.
Right.
And,
so
everything's here to prove.
I've heard a lot of people make this claim, and I'm a big defender of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of the oral law. And I'll tell you, the vast majority of people that I've seen drop orthodoxy, they typically drop it for something that has nothing to do with halakha, but they were told that it was halakha. The truth is, the only real halakha is what appears in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah and like Mishnaic literature, like the Baraitot. Like, for example, getting drunk on Purim doesn't appear in the Mishnah. People do it, and I've seen good people be coerced into getting drunk on Purim, saying that God wants you to get drunk, but it doesn't appear in the Mishnah. That means it's a tradition that arose essentially out of Bavel. So the rabbis are not teaching halakha correctly nowadays, and they're thrusting an exaggerated form of ritualized Judaism on a populace that really doesn't want it. If someone kept plain halakha as it appears in the Mishnah, it would be the easiest thing to keep. It's not so all-encompassing. It's very plain. It's very simple. Heck, there's no separation between meat and milk. They have to understand, only because the Rambam said around 6 hours, the Talmud doesn't say anything. It says basically, rinse your mouth. But now they'll yell at you if you're like, oh, if you want to be yucky and you want to keep 3 hours, or you want to be Dutch and keep 1 hour, they'll still yell at you. It shows that there's a dumbification in Judaism, that we're willing to lose people for the sake of upholding tradition. And when I say tradition, it's not Masorah. From an Orthodox perspective, we believe Masorah goes back to Moses via a court that had smicha. It's just customs that crept into our religion that we can't let go of. And this is why the Sidurim get bigger every year. All the Piyutim on my website, which is TorahJudaism.com, we've translated the Sidur into English from the Rambam, along with all the Maksorim of the Rambam, and it took us 45 minutes to daven the Yom Kippur service according to the Rambam. 45 minutes. Compare that to 5 hours of davening. It's so ridiculous that they don't care who leaves Judaism. Who could have kavanah for 5 hours? Okay, maybe someone who doesn't go to shul every day, but if you're there every day and now you're starving, which fine, absolutely, we have to fast, but just because a few rabbis thought that they know better, and these aren't rabbis with real smicha who sat on the Sanhedrin, modern day rabbis, all the piyutim of the Arizal that crept in there, and they're saying, we know better and we want you to say this. And if someone says, you know what, it may be too much, they'll be like, well, this is Judaism, love it or leave it. And people will leave it. And then they wonder, why is there a crisis? Well, the reason there's a crisis is because you've added to the Torah. And the Torah means even adding to the oral Torah. To be what's called a Baal Tosif, who adds, that also applies when someone adds rabbinic laws that aren't really binding. Now, if they say, this is just a custom, you don't have to do it, you could if you want to, no one's going to do it, okay? Because people don't want to keep metaphysical things they don't feel is obligatory. We have many more things we could do. We could spend time with our kids. We could go water skiing, whatever you want. And I think this is what God wants us to do, to enjoy life. But I think the religion has been hijacked by essentially a bunch of fanatics who, if you try to engage in a dialogue with them on what's halakha or how is halakha developed, they're clueless. Because they have notions like Yeridat Hadarot.
What if I said, I want to know what you think about it? I think there are two things. It's one thing that the tradition practically changed after expulsion. Different galut, things change, because, when there's an absence of temple, there are new things that you have to do in order to remember those rituals that you can't really do in its original context.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another thing, which is all these formulations of crazy, implementation of halacha based on the opinion of 10 different rabbis. And some of them, sometimes, the ritual doesn't even apply to the opinion of one single rabbi. It's just a combination of what 10 different rabbis said. And people were like, you know what? We're going to put together all of their opinions, so it's not completely wrong based on any of them, but it's not completely right, which is basically completely wrong based on every single opinion. And sorry, I thought of a mess here. But what if I said this second thing that I'm saying is pretty much it's an Ashkenazi influence. I don't think this included in Sephardic or Mizrahi traditions. A lot of times, because the approach to halakha in between Sephardic rabbinism, especially the Mizrahi rabbinism in Babylon, not even Babylon back then, right now, in contemporary times, is that we were going to take a particular opinion from one rabbi and we're going to go with it, as an example, we have the situation with the Zah. One rabbi says, put it straight, and that's been interpreted by Sephardim as straight. So they're just going to go with it. But then, people in Europe were like, well, one says straight, one says slant, one says straight meaning flat. So we're going to put it slanted, so it's not completely wrong based on any of those opinions. It's sort of formulating a new ritual that is basically, it's sort of wrong based on both of those opinions because it doesn't completely abide by any of them. Now you come up with this new thing that's the slanted mezuzah. It's not completely flat. It's not completely straight. I think this is a little bit partly was an Ashkenazi approach that became prominent after, especially Ashkenazi Judaism became very dominant for years. And a lot of people, let's say in my own community, they thought they're doing things wrong. They thought it's their fault they're doing things wrong. As an example, my grandparents clearly remember not really caring about mixing milk with chicken because to them, chickens don't have milk. And this doesn't apply to halakha at all, But then later, when they were exposed to Ashkenazi communities, they thought they were doing something wrong, I think these complications arise, and it results in the problems that you were talking about, which is why I think in more liberal communities, less, by the book, especially in Israel, see that Sephardic tradition sometimes is taking, it's easier for people to obey. I don't know, what do you think about that?
So,
I think it's a controversial take, maybe.
I think they both have faults. The Ashkenazim and the Sephardim both have faults, mainly because when you say Sephardi, you're thinking of the Rambam, okay, or the Chachamim of Aleppo or something like that. But Sephardi Judaism changed a lot after Shabtai Tzvi and the rise of the Arizal and Kabbalah and clearly, I mean, even to today, I mean, Sephardic Jews seem more engulfed. I mean, apart from Hasidim, they're more engulfed and enthralled with notions of Kabbalah than actual Ashkenazim. Ashkenazim are known for bringing in a lot of customs, European customs. However, the Ashkenazim are supposedly the descendants of Jews from Eretz Yisrael, and the Sephardim are the descendants of Jews from Babel. They have a different approach, but I would say that nowadays they both sort of have faults. I mean, in terms of the mezuzah, clearly, according to the Talmud, and it's how the Sephardim do it. It says that it has to be upright.
Just the Jews in Persia are not directly, but, or at least most of them, let's say. But people who lived in Sepharad, and the rabbinic tradition in Sepharad, were people who were expelled from Eretz Israel directly. They were the same people as Ashkenazim who went there, but they in fact may have left the land even later. Which is why you do see a lot of differences between Sephardim from actual Sepharad versus Mizrahim from Persia. Like, you do see a lot of differences in traditions, honestly.
Right, I failed to make that distinction, yes.
What I'm saying is mostly the approach. I think what I'm talking, like, of course they both have faults, but what I'm really thinking about is mostly, like, the approach. I feel like there's a very, like, a European, I guess, technocrat, maybe is the word, like, very, like, you know, like, there's all these formulating of rituals after different opinions versus what was traditionally just taking an opinion over other opinions that exist on the same issue.
So Sephardi Judaism has always been understood as din Judaism. Now, what's the actual din? While Ashkenazi opinions bring in many different opinions and formulate new ones, like you said, like the mezuzah being slanted, it's a compromise by Ashkenazim, because I think it's Tosfos who says that it should be slanted, but the Talmud says that it should be vertical, right? So let's kind of meet them in the middle type approach, right? And clearly, all the codifications of Jewish law, I mean, the early ones, you know, the Rif, the Rosh, the Rambam, I mean, these are all people, I mean, the Rif is not technically Sephardi, but yeah, I mean, I failed to make the distinction that, I mean, Sephardi means from Spain, and the Rambam was from Spain, you know, but I mean, nowadays, they lump everyone who's not Ashkenazi as Sephardi, right? And I know Persians get upset, Turks get upset when they consider them Sephardi, and they're technically not Sephardi.
No, we don't. Like, you're right. Religiously, we are Sephardic, but like you said, like, tradition plays a big part in this kind of thing. Like, European tradition, Persian tradition, and like Spaniard tradition, and that's why it's influenced some of the rituals. I don't want to Persian people get offended by that. In fact, the word Mizrahi is sometimes problematic because it's like it's a new word, like completely created in Israel that people didn't even self-identify with, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like Adota Mizrach.
Because people knew what Sephardic in Iran, you know, but we didn't look at ourselves Mizrahi in Iran, like we're in Mizrah, you know. What do you mean?
Yeah, but anyways, there's an easy solution to this. Yeah. That you could go according to Halakha, go straight according to Shulchan Aruch, or go straight according to the Mishneh Torah, and you would kind of evade 50% of what people call Halakha nowadays. Because people say they go by Shulchan Aruch, but it's not really true. They add a lot of things that don't appear in Shulchan Aruch. For example, Kabbalistic ideas. Right? I mean, why don't people put on tefillin during Chol HaMoed? It seems that according to Talmud, you're supposed to put it on. According to the Zohar, you don't. The Arizal was not Ashkenazi. All these Kabbalists, the Radak and all these people, they've added a lot of practices, but they failed to make a distinction and say, like, no, this is an optional thing, you know, but nowadays it's taught like, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. All right? I mean, heck, even wearing a kippah, the Rambam calls it midat hasidut, that it's like a pious thing to do, this and that, but it's not a halakha. But fast forward to the Mishnah Berurah, now it's a halacha. I think according to Mishnah Berurah, now you have to wear like a talis katan also, right? I mean, this is not the halakha, you know, but people are scared to question rabbis. I mean, rightly so, because they're going to get pummeled by the community. They're going to be like, do you think you know more than this rabbi, this and that, instead of saying, no, let's go back to the Talmud. Let's see what the halakha actually is. But if you do that nowadays, you get insulted and you get kicked out of a synagogue, unfortunately. I mean, if Rabbi Akiva was walking around today, I mean, he would definitely be called a heretic, because it'll be like, what? I mean, you think you know more than the Chafetz Chaim?
It's definitely true. It's definitely true. I think it's a cultural thing with Jewish people in general, that we tend to complicate things. And then, you know, then we know so much because we did that, you know. And that's